Welcome to the Mavens Do It Better podcast. And now, your host, Heather Newman.
Hello, everyone. Here we are again for another Mavens Do It Better podcast, where we interview extraordinary experts who bring a light to our world. I'm very excited to have Dr. Tammy Nelson, PhD, on the show today. She is a sex and relationship expert, a therapist. She's an author. She's a relationship therapist. You're a TEDx speaker. You're all the things. So welcome and hi.
Thank you. I like being all the things.
Yeah, fabulous. And a big thank you to our mutual friend, Tracy Talley, for connecting us. So yay, Tracy.
Tracy.
Yeah. So you're here in, are you still here in Los Angeles? You've been here all the time? Is that where you're filming from today?
Yeah, I'm in LA. Yep. Beautiful day.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. The only thing for me is that Orange Theory opened up their outdoor classes outside. And so all day long I'm hearing 1 more and 3 more and 4 more. I was just like, seriously?
Oh my God. That's so annoying.
You shut the window on that one for sure. So, anyway, but yeah, so you have a fascinating job. And as we were talking beforehand, kind of busy right now, I would assume.
Yeah, with every week there's like a new plot twist of what's going on in the world. And so people are understandably kind of stressed and, we're sort of living in this moment of uncertainty. So couples have been home like during the pandemic or in lockdown. It's creating a lot of stress. So yeah. I do Zoom sessions, and so I'm really busy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think, relationship-wise, during something like this where we are together all the time, you're probably getting every shade, but it's sort of like either people are together all the time and like, or, people are like, I need space, or people are getting together because they just convenience and other things. Is there something that's, I don't know, it's probably all over. Is there anything that's typical right now? Or is it just
Well, people fall on one side or the other. Like they're either getting along better because they're finally spending time together and they're not complaining like you're never home, you're always traveling, you're always out, whatever. So they finally have that like really good quality time that they want. On the other hand, that really good quality time is like enough already.
Right.
I've been around you enough. So the things that would normally not bother you so much because you're out of the house and you have like other things to distract you are now like driving you insane. So the fact that, your partner's leaving their socks on the floor or they don't do the dishes, like, you're busy at work, you're out in your life. It's like, whatever. By the time you get home, maybe it's taken care of, maybe it's not, but you got like a lot of other things to think about. Right. And now like, you just zone in on that dish in the sink. You're like, oh no, that's not going to stay there.
So how does one get to where you are did you start in sort of couples therapy, but then is that always about sex therapy as well? Or we talk about where you came up in the world to get where you are today?
Yeah. I mean, I've been a therapist for like 30 years, but I started off, I actually got my master's in art therapy. So I was an artist for a long time.
Gotcha.
And I had a like mixed past. It took me a long time to get where I am. I'm in my late 50s. Mm-hmm. It took me 10 years to get my bachelor's degree. It took me, I was already a grown up when I went to graduate school. Mm-hmm. I never had the experience of like living in a dorm or all the things that my kids have that I was able to give them. But I worked with people who had sexual abuse or substance abuse, or I worked pretty much with everything. Right. And then I got into couples therapy, and I went to Imago relationship therapy. Imago therapy is a type of couples counseling. It was created by Harville Hendrix, who wrote the book Getting the Love You Want.
Oh, okay.
He was one of Oprah's 10 best shows or something. He's been on Oprah, I think, 25 times. Wow. But the idea of Imago therapy was really intriguing to me because I was married to my first husband at the time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, we really need this. So we went to a weekend a Getting the Love You Want weekend of imago therapy. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, this is the kind of marriage that I want. And I want to be an imago therapist. So I went and got trained as an imago therapist, which takes a couple of years and a lot of angsting and crying on the floor about your childhood and bonding with other therapists. Because, we do that for fun. We love that.
Right. Absolutely. Sure.
But my husband at the time was like, I said, isn't this great? Like, we can have this deep conversations about our relationship. And he was like, oh my God, why can't you just be like a dental hygienist? Like, this is way too intense for me. So that didn't work out. Yeah. And, but then, I worked with couples for so long and I realized that, imago therapy, none of the training I got all these certificates, all these letters after my name. I was kind of obsessed with it. And they never talked about sex. And I found that fascinating. Like, I was like, we're not working with roommates here. Like, how come there's no graduate program about sex? I was just intrigued by that.
Sure. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. No, I don't know. I feel like we're still very secretive about sex, I think, as a society. And we certainly in our relationships don't always talk about it, So I guess, how did you get I love the talk, will you talk about your TED Talk?
Yeah, so I did a TEDx talk in Bucharest, and that was interesting too, because by then I got my doctorate in sexology, and I've written a bunch of books. I wrote Getting the Sex You Want, which is using imago therapy to talk about sexuality, because they never talk about sex. I was certified as a sex therapist, and my mission was to teach every therapist how to talk about sex to their clients so that they could talk about sex. Right. And then I realized that people were also coming into therapy because they had not just like neglected their sex life and needed like some passion and aliveness, but because there was like some kind of trauma in their sex life, like infidelity or some kind of betrayal. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I wrote The New Monogamy, which is redefining your relationship after infidelity. And it's all about like, you can sort of have a do-over or a reboot. And you can pretty much heal from almost anything if you have the skills. And so I think the TEDx people knew my book, and they asked me to come to Bucharest. It was like the 10-year anniversary there of them doing TED Talks. So it was a big event. Yeah. And so they wanted me to talk about the new monogamy. So I was like thrilled.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that, do you feel like the last few years, like the big shifts in like gender fluidity and sort of when we have sort of all of that coming up and traditional, I guess, cisgender roles and all of that, those things like being looked at and talked about more, especially sort of from a millennial perspective. I don't like the word millennial, but that sort of age group perspective. How do you think that's affected people in their relationships and monogamy, I guess?
Well, I think we're in the age of a more open monogamy. That's my next book that's coming out in 2021. Yeah. It sounds true. I think that open monogamy is like an agreement that you have with your partner to be more flexible and fluid about the whole conversation, right, and not to be so traditional. I think that's because of people coming up now in this generation whose parents got divorced or had affairs or, lived through that kind of trauma. And they're saying now, you know what, I'm not going through that again. Yeah. And they sort of honor and understand that you can love a lot of people and you can be attracted to a lot of people, and that doesn't necessarily take away from the relationship you have, and you don't have to lie about it. And right. maybe trading your partner in for somebody else isn't the answer either. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find, I found that I went through a divorce as well, was married a long time, 23 years, and in a relationship now. And I feel like the most work a lot of times that we don't do is the work that we need to do on ourselves,
Well, Well, I think the hardest thing to do is to be married. I mean, we always marry someone that we're totally fundamentally incompatible with. Like, that's totally what marriage is about for everyone across the board. But you do that for like a spiritual reason. Like, you do it because you are looking to heal a part of yourself or grow a part of yourself. Like, you have a shadow that you project onto someone else and you're like, God, you're so annoying. You're so messy. You're so obnoxious. But that's really the part of us that we don't want to look at. Like, I'll leave all the cabinet doors open and focus on that glass in the sink. And he's looking behind me like, really? Did you see the mess you left behind you? That swath of disaster.
Yeah.
But I don't see my stuff. Right. And so relationships are like a way to work on your stuff that you can't really do on your own. Like, yes, you should do your own work, but I sort of think of it as like a bridge where I have my side of the bridge where I have to do my stuff, and they have their side of the bridge where they have to do their stuff. And then the hard part sometimes is like, how do you meet on the bridge? Because that's where that's where your sexuality is together and your communication and, how are you as roommates? All that stuff is, how do you show up on the bridge and where do you meet on the bridge? And do you run back to your side of the bridge or do you take over the whole bridge? Are you burning it down? Like, what are you doing on the bridge?
Right. I feel like I'm like a horn section. Let's take it to the bridge. Right. like a good James Brown song. I don't know.
Segue.
Yeah, totally. Wow. So, in coming up and then doing the TED Talk, so have you how long have you had your own practice, I guess?
I've been in private practice for about 25 years because my oldest son is like 24. So so for like 25 years, I've been seeing people in my private practice on all kinds of people.
Yeah. Speaking of children, how do the kids feel about you being a sex therapist? If you don't mind me asking,
Well, I mean, when they were younger, I remember my son being like, Mom, can you just tell people like you're a regular therapist? But now they're older. Like, my youngest is in college and she's like, can you please send me like 3 copies of Getting the Sex You Want? Because my friends want to read copies.
Yes, right. So it's become a bit more popular though.
Yeah, they all brag about me. If I have like a press thing or something in a magazine, like my older stepdaughters will post it all over social media. They're like my biggest fans now.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, that's super cool. And you have a podcast as well. You want to tell everybody about that?
Yeah, the podcast is The Trouble with Sex. And, I interview experts or authors or sex workers or somebody every week, somebody in the field of sex, and talk about what they think the biggest trouble with sex is and what they think the answer is. So it's fascinating. I got all range of people. It's really fun. You know what it's like to interview people on a podcast.
Yeah, I listen as well. I've been checking yours out, and I've been listening to Sex with Emily as well. Like, she's hilarious and does a good job. Although I look on Twitter and like when people are asking sort of these super personal questions, I was like, I don't know if I can talk about that, in a poll or something sort of outwardly on Twitter, where people are asking sort of, to poll questions on like, what do you think about XYZ? And you're like, I don't know if I can do that. All the people that I work with are going to see that, a little bit, probably not. But yeah. So, and you regularly, so you've been speaking and you've got a book coming out. Like, how do you find time to take care of you and all of your life,
Well, I think that's why I moved to LA, because I was living in Connecticut for years. That's where we raised our kids. And, the last big ice storm where we had to take a blowtorch to get the key in the lock of our cars because there was so much ice on the outside of the car. And then we lost power for a week. And, there's no like heat or electricity. So you can't flush a toilet there because everything's on well water. I was like, you know what? I am not cut out to be a pioneer woman. I just can't. I'm too old for this. I never want to shovel my car out again for the rest of my life. And so, I've been in Santa Monica. Now I'm in LA for about a year and a half. And this is taking care of myself, like living in the sun.
Yeah.
You know, like not having to suffer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I lived in the Pacific Northwest for a really long time, so I get you. You know, beautiful, love it up there. But yeah, I'm a fan of the sunshine. I've really gotten used to the LA life for all about that. So yeah.
I love the beach. It's beautiful. I love to be able to be outside all year long and, you know, and never have it freeze. I mean, the fires suck. You know, that's kind of cataclysmic, and you can't really forget about sort of, you know, Armageddon that's happening around you.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a total bummer. But, you know, it's a beautiful place.
Yeah. It is a beautiful place. And it's, you know, full of all kinds of people and just opportunities and all of that. I mean, obviously we're in this bizarre time, you know, with our pandemic and, you know, this week, almost the election and everything else that's going on in the world. It's like, okay.
Crazy.
We'll try and get outside a little bit and do some walking around for sure. So, yeah. So, you know, if someone sort of really generically, like, I guess, top advice for couples to spice up their lives without a whole lot of knowledge about them, is there something that you can toss out to our listeners? Something to help spice up maybe a sort of a humdrum sex life for them?
Yeah, my suggestion is to have a sex date every week. Now, people sometimes say, well, that's not spontaneous. I'm like, you know what? If you want to sweep the dishes off the kitchen table and say, oh my God, take me now, and be impulsive, you could do that. That's impulsive sex. That's not spontaneous sex.
Yeah. Right.
I think if you set up a sex date the same time every week, the same night, and you treat it like it's a sacred thing, like yoga or meditation, you show up, you light some candles, not tea party sex. Like, it's not like, oh my God, this is so, you know, sweet. But it's sacred as something separate. Like, it's dedicated an hour a week to the two of you, to your erotic life, and you show up, whether there's something better on Netflix or you're mad at each other or you haven't taken a shower. Like, you show up, you take a shower, you dress up. If you've been in lockdown or in the pandemic, you know, put on some shoes, you know, like, really do it up.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. And like, have that time together. You don't have to, you know, if you're a heterosexual couple, you don't have to have penis and vagina sex. Just show up and, you know, see what happens, talk to each other, make that time sequestered and focused. Because if you do that on a regular basis, what happens is you get like anticipatory eroticism that kicks in. We start to look forward to it. Even if your head's like, oh, totally don't want to do it this week. Your body's going to be like, yeah, but I do.
I remember that from last week and I liked it or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Our body has like a neurological pathway that remembers pleasure much more than it remembers pain. So we're going to go, yeah, I want that again. Yeah.
There was a quote from one of your podcasts that I really like that was talking about the need to rename foreplay. That foreplay is not the appetizer of sex. It's the main course. Amen. Will you talk a bit about that as well for our listeners?
Well, yeah, I think, you know, foreplay is like somehow just the precursor to intercourse. Yeah. And it's interesting because, first of all, we assume that all couples are heterosexual couples where there's penis and vagina sex. Mm-hmm. And secondly, that is somehow the appetizer, not the real deal. And third, it's very focused on what women, quote unquote, need, and that men shouldn't need it, like, which is not true at all. Like, men need touching and caressing, and they need a workup to those levels of arousal before they get to the, you know, to the final ending, whatever that is. And it really sort of implies that sex is like a performance, you know, and that the ultimate success is getting to the finish line, which is usually the male ejaculation. Right. And it'd be great if we could turn that conversation around to like, okay, what if it was just about pleasure? Like, this is just about pleasure date, and how much pleasure can we squeeze out of this time that we have together? And that's the only goal. Like, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Well, and so much is the focus on orgasm, be it male or female, or that it's got to be this like the crashing of the cymbal crescendo thing. I think, especially in a time like this, I'm like, I would assume that maybe even just for couples that are together, that, you know, like there's a lot of people who aren't with somebody else right now and aren't getting that simple physical touch. If you're, you know, one of the love languages, if you're up there with the physical touch, it's tough for folks right now. I would assume that you're talking to on a regular basis on both sides, potentially. Yeah.
Yeah, I think people have like a skin hunger in general. Like, you know, the fact that you can't like hug people, you can't shake hands when you see people, when you meet someone new. Like, I kind of miss that, you know, giving people a kiss on the cheek. You know, that's the normal way that we would satisfy some of that desire for touch, and just to like exchange smells. We're like mammals, you know, like we want to smell people.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think I was just down with my folks last weekend. It was the first time I wasn't really out and about, but because we were masked and socially distancing, but it was a moment where somebody, their friend who knows me, they were like, "Hi there," and I was like, "Stop!" You know, and I was like, I felt like it was like the Night of the Living Dead, and I was like freaking out, and I just felt like a jerk, you know, because I was like, "No, I love you too, and I would love to hug you, but I can't do that right now," you know. So there's just a lot of that kind of emotional that is just in our world right now, I think, about what to do, what not to do, and how to do it right, or making sure we're safe and all of that.
Sad.
Yeah, it is. It is sad. I think sex is also about practice, like, you know, like right? Like trying things out. And like, do you have exercises you give people through your therapy for different things? I'm sure there are.
Oh, yeah. I mean, sex therapy is pretty behavioral. Like there's a lot of exercises. If you have some kind of sexual dysfunction, there's ways we can fix it. A lot of sex problems at their root are really about anxiety. You know, a lot can be cured if you're not anxious. You know, erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, anorgasmia, like the inability to orgasm, like a lot of that stuff, if it's not medical, if it's not because you're on medication, a lot of it is anxiety. And so being able to be hyper aware of pleasure, what that means, you know, being really mindful, taking it slow, backing it way down.
Right. Yeah.
All those things. Yeah.
Yeah. I talk a bit about the fear narrative that in our lizard brain that we have running through our heads, and talking about how to combat that. I mean, I don't know, with the level of stress that's happening right now, and the what if. I mean, when we are a problem comes to us, we're like, okay, I'm going to deal with it, right? But do you find that it's just that whole stress worry narrative is taking over for so many people right now? Is that just...
Well, everyone's stressed. If you're not stressed, there's something pathological about you. Because I don't care how like well-adjusted spiritual you are. Like the world is stretched like a rubber band right now. It's so tight.
Yeah, right.
All it takes is just a little ping for people to freak out. Like if the outside world is like pretty okay, then, you know, it takes a lot to stress you out. But everything is, you know, the tension is high. Yeah. And if you don't feel it, it means you're sort of out of touch or in wicked denial, which God bless you. If that works for you, that's great. But it's also, it's not teaching you how to deal with, you know, the high stakes that we're living in these days, because who knows what the new normal is and how long this is going to last, or if this is forever. Yep. So it's really important to understand how you deal with stress, and what your skill set is, and what your like sort of the bad coping skills that you have, the negative coping skills. You know, are you like drinking too much, which most people are? Are you eating too much, which a lot of people do? You know, like what are you doing that you could maybe attribute to stress and anxiety that, you know, isn't really serving you? Maybe you could like tweak that a little bit, but not beat yourself up.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. For the book, you have not only the new monogamy, the book, but you have an agreement in there. Will you talk about that a little bit too?
Yeah, so the monogamy agreement is something that, we make it this explicit agreement when you get married or you have some kind of committed partnership. But the words that you speak out loud aren't always the implicit assumptions that you're going to make about your relationship. Like, yeah, we're getting married, but I know I can get out of it. Like everybody knows you could get divorced. It's not like a secret. It's not that you don't go to divorce prison if you leave a marriage. Like there's a lot of assumptions about what a marriage is supposed to look like or what a partnership is supposed to serve for you. So a monogamy agreement is a way to have a conversation about, okay, well, this is not our grandparents' monogamy. Like this, we're going to live a lot longer than generations before us. So we're going to have to figure out, what does this mean? Like we don't have to get married. Like we don't have to get married to have kids. We don't have to get married to buy a house. We don't have to get married to, get health insurance. Like the reality is marriage is optional. And so is monogamy. Monogamy is totally optional. It's a choice. So let's design it in the way that works for the two of us or the three of us or five of us or whatever. Let's have the conversation so that it's not just implicitly assumed that it's going to be the same as our grandparents assumed it was, because obviously that didn't work out very well because half of those people got divorced. Yeah. So let's agree. Let's talk about what is on the monogamy continuum. So on one end, it's like, how do you feel about flirting with other people? How do you feel about, what's private and what's secret? Like, do you talk about masturbation, pornography? And then all the way on the other end of the spectrum, the far end is like, are we going to be sleeping with other people together, alone, polyamorous? Like, where do we fall on that agreement? And by the way, you got to revisit that all the time because we change and grow as people and we develop in a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think I don't see people talking about those things as much. You just sort of make assumptions, dive in, and you're like, even if you're in a committed relationship, sometimes like I've talked to girlfriends and other things about it. It's like, one person will be fine with somebody's eyes trailing somebody as they walk because they find them attractive, and somebody else will be like, what the you know what I mean? Like,
right, exactly.
Like, I'm gonna flip the table on that. And yeah. And it is interesting that I don't think our impulse is to talk about that stuff with each other. I mean, it's not my natural impulse to be like, is that okay with you? What do you think? Or did that make you mad or whatever? Like we're not taught to talk like that about it, I don't think at all. No.
And interestingly, the more you make these things a talk aboutable thing, the more freedom you have in the relationship, even if it's the freedom to shut it down, even if it's the freedom to say, I don't like it when you check out other people with me. Like that makes me super uncomfortable. The reality is the more you can talk about those things, the more potential there is for closeness and connection and understanding. And, you feel like, wow, we could talk about anything. Like we're really on the same page, which means we could talk about stuff before it goes wrong, which is the whole point, right? It's preventative.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the thing, I don't know, in some of my own relationships, learning about, I don't want to call it honesty, but I want to call it just openness, I guess,
like and transparency.
Yeah. Transparency. Yeah. All of that. Cause it's like, you're like, that kind of bugged me, but I'm not going to talk about it or whatever, like, and then all of a sudden you're like, there's this giant mountain that's been made. And you're like, rah! Like you were saying, like the pile of stuff over there that you made, I'm going to, and I don't know, maybe I'm getting, smarter as I get older. Just
you've listened to a lot of podcasts. Apparently.
Yeah, I have listened to a lot of podcasts. I really, who else I really, I like some of the codependency books and that kind of narcissist codependency, like that kind of information things as well, books and different things about that, not naming any other authors while we're on, but like some of that stuff I think is helpful to have people understand those types of relationships too. Cause I think we get into sometimes an enablement situation where you're enabling bad behavior, that never happens in relationships, right? She's like, I don't know if I want to go there. But yeah, no, I find that stuff kind of interesting. So your new book, When is that supposed to come out ish?
It's not coming out till next year.
Next year. Okay.
Yeah. And I'll definitely be back on your podcast when it comes out to tell everyone.
That's awesome. Yeah. And is that one more, is that all from you or interviews, or does it all come from sort of your work as well? Or do you, I know you don't name names, I'm sure, but like, is it from sort of all the things that you're doing? Like where does the meat come from that for you?
So the Open Monogamy, the new book, it is really a reaction to a lot of people who read the New Monogamy, which is redefining your relationship after infidelity, who said, well, can't we do this too? Like, can't we have a new monogamy? Can't we have a relationship agreement? Do we have to have an affair first? Does things have to fall apart before that happens? Mm-hmm. And so, this publisher was like, no, let's write the book about creating that monogamy agreement for everyone. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to be in a crisis before you reevaluate your relationship. So I actually interviewed probably about 16 couples or pods of people in relationship. And I talk about their stories and how they handle their open monogamy agreement. Okay. And then I give people sort of exercises or ways to bring up the conversation, ways to talk about it, how to shut it down if it's not working, what's going to work for you specifically in your situation, and what it might look like once you do it.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's super cool. I was also looking through some of the podcasts. You have such great people on. It's so cool. How long have you been doing the podcast?
Well, we're just about to record our 4th season.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, we have some cool people. I've definitely gotten better at it. It's a skill set.
Yeah, it is. I mean, so when you first started, like your first one, were you just like, how'd it go for you?
No, when I first started, it was super clinical. I don't think we edited as well as the ones we have edited now. We had a different producer, and
right.
It was much more clinical and academic. They sort of call us the NPR of sex podcasts. And I think it was just too heavy on the information. The guests were brilliant,
right? And
it was fun. But, I've been interviewing, experts for years and years in different platforms. Right. But I wanted this to be a little lighter. And so as we've gone on, we've gotten a little more personal, a little lighter. I think they're funnier. I think they're better. I think they'll just keep getting better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, 4 seasons in. Yeah, we're about it. Actually, this week, this is our 2nd season. So yeah, it's been fun learning the equipment and I don't know, just sort of finding your way and interviewing people and all of that. But I like, do you do video as well for them anywhere?
No, we just do audio.
Do audio, yeah. I know, we started doing video for a while, and it was like it's kind of fun seeing people's faces.
I agree. I like that. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. Plus, you can do little clips and stuff from it too. I was really interested in the one that the episode 31, understanding adult ADHD, to relationships and sex life. I think I don't know. Working in tech, I think I know more people who have things like than anybody. What was that conversation like, and what are some of the tips around dealing with that? I think that's a big mental issue for a lot of people. I don't know, tips and tricks.
Yeah, that's Ari Tuckman, who wrote ADHD After Dark. He talks about having sex with someone who's got ADD, or if you are an ADD or ADHD and you and you're struggling in your sex life. I mean, it's not just like, oh, squirrel, like I'm in the middle of having sex and there's a shiny object and
right.
It's more people who have ADD. I have adult ADD, and it's actually served me quite well in my life because I have a lot of different interests. I can, I'm very expansive. I can do 17 things at once. The downside of that is I don't finish everything. I do it to like 80% and I'm like, okay, that's done. But, that's kind of typical of people with adult ADD, is that they tend to be super creative and have a lot of ideas. Mm-hmm. And so they might act that out in bed too. Like they might always be like pushing you to do something new and let's try this and let's try that. Or the opposite could be true. They could get bored easily or distracted.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And are you, I know that you have a podcast that addresses social justice. Do you do work in that realm as well? About sex education and politics and that kind of stuff?
I'm really dedicated to the idea of reproductive justice. I'm really upset about the Supreme Court. I'm super freaked out about women's right to abortion and to our bodies. I'm so out of my mind about people trying to take us back like 50 or 100 years. Yeah. And so I'm really dedicated to supporting experts in the field who are talking about, look, people, like, pay attention. This is not something that you can sit back and relax about. Like, this is important stuff happening. And I feel like these are women who, I've interviewed, and actually we have a class coming up on reproductive justice, like big attorneys and people who've written books on Roe versus Wade, and people who are on the ground working at abortion clinics, and people who counsel women. And, a lot of it is sex ed, and a lot of it is also knowing your rights and knowing our history. It's like abortion is not going to stop just because some guy says it's against the law. It's just going to get harder, more dangerous, and it's going to be worse for people who can't access it. So, it kills me. I feel like we've come so far as women and as healers and as therapists or intuitives or wherever you fall in that spectrum. Yeah, I mean, they can't burn us anymore. That's a plus. Right. But, they're trying hard to take away all our other rights as human beings. And that's so bothersome.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think there's so much right now that trying to keep a pulse on and an eye on, and also keep educated and, keep up on what's happening. And it's overwhelming, but worth every moment to stay vigilant, as they say, I think, right now, and educating each other. And I love, you have a beautiful Instagram account where you're putting all kinds of great things up and inspirational stuff, and also where to get information. And I think thank you for doing that one.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. No, I think it's really, really cool. How you're spanning so many different things. And you ever sleep?
Oh, I love to sleep, trust me, but I go to bed early.
Yeah. I've gotten so I'm doing that more. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I'm out by like 9:30. I'm like done. I try to stay up and watch Netflix, and then I'm like,
yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's talk to me about how you feel about lube and sex toys. How about that?
Well, you can never have too much lube, I don't think. I mean, what do they say? The wetter, the better. Like, I think lube is not for, just postmenopausal women. Like, everyone should use lube. Lube is fun now. Yeah. It used to be that it gave you urinary tract infections and it had too many smelly, weird things in it. Yeah. Now it's, you can buy lube that's all natural and all organic, has no additives or anything. It's much better for your body.
Yep.
And the sex toy industry too has changed. I mean, the sales of sex toys have gone way up since the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the sex toys now are made, designed, distributed by, marketed by, and for women. So they don't look like big, giant penises with veins in them anymore. Like, they're really cute and pretty, and you can put them on your bedside table.
Yeah, absolutely. Vesper. Totally fun. Like, just, not to like give endorsements and stuff, but it's like I've seen so many neat things coming out, and you're like, okay, right on. So yeah, I would imagine that makes sense that the sales are up on those kinds of things for sure.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. If there was something that like has surprised you, just totally like, you're like, wow, that you could talk about with our listeners sort of in your field, that what's been happening as of later the last year, is there anything that you were like, there's so many things, like, didn't see that one coming, but something that really stands out? I don't know.
I didn't see Trump getting elected. that stands out as like the last 4 years of like, wait, what? What's happening?
Fair.
And,
yeah.
And that really does affect the world of psychotherapy, because one of the problems is that if you have a certain political affiliation that seems like it's sort of cult-like and in denial about women's rights or the rights of homosexuals or other freedoms that should be sort of allotted to us as human beings, and you're really rigid about that, I don't see that as a political issue. I see that as a mental health issue. I also think it's symptomatic of growing up perhaps in an abusive home where you're taught to follow your abusive dad, no matter what he says. And I think it's another reaction to stress. So you were talking about stress before. The fight, flight, or freeze response is pretty normal. People do one or the other. But I've also seen in the past 4 years in particular, a fawning response. So it's, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And it's this usually women who like fawn over some guy who's really abusive and inappropriate as they're backing out of the room as a way to like mitigate the abusive situation. And I've seen that a lot in this presidency, and a lot of women who are like cult-like following someone who's telling them to their face, like, I'm going to grab you and I'm going to hurt you. And I'm not going to care who you are. And this is not going to be good for you. And they're like, okay, all right. And I think that fawning is an interesting response to stress. And it's also indicative of where our culture is as far as gender roles, and that, they have to change. Like we're all on the verge of something that's about to blow us apart or bring us together.
Yeah, I feel that for sure. Yeah, I think you're obviously on point. You got a PhD in all kinds of things. I mean, you're wicked smart about all of this stuff. Yeah, but I feel that too. I feel like also just the continuous, I have friends that are both Republican and Democrat and everything. And, a lot of the time, and I could talk to just about all of them, but there's shame on different sides of different things, depending on where you are on the spectrum of your politics and where you've grown up and how you are like so many men with the Me Too movement were like, I don't know what to do. Can I even flirt with you? And just like that. And then layered on top of, all of what's been going on, with police and all of that other stuff, I think people just, one, it's like, just don't be a jerk, one. But two, it's like people are so afraid to make mistakes right now, so they don't do anything. So there's that freeze, I guess. It might be part of that, what you were talking about as well. But I haven't heard of the fawning stuff. That's really frightening.
Mm-hmm. Well, just watch the news.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, now that you say that and put a word to it, I'm like, oh, I've seen that. Like, I know exactly what you're talking about now.
Right, exactly.
Wow.
Well, I think there's also a new masculine that's rising to the surface to sort of combat the toxicity that's been there for a long time. Like I've seen men, start to gather and support each other and be more communicative, and there's definitely a push for people to change in good ways. Yeah,
I've seen also just a lot of men standing up for. It's that moment when you're like, you see something, you say something, that people are like, oh, no, that's not how we talk to each other. Or, no, this person needs to speak, that stop interrupting, or, just all of those things that people sometimes think are like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. I'm like, actually it is. It means something. It's kind of like how a handwritten thank you note, I still think means something.
So are you saying I should write you a handwritten note after this?
I'm going to write you one, girl, okay? For sure. Wow. Thank you so much for, there's so much to talk to you about all of this stuff, and you have such a wealth of information. So everybody, the podcast, Dr. Tammy's podcast is amazing. So you have to check it out. She's got all these great books, and maybe this is a time where we, it's that great pause that everybody's been talking about, or the reset or whatever. And, so like if you're having moments with relationships and your own sexuality and all of that, like there's great resources and books, and a wonderful person here who is so smart on these subjects and has Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all of the things so that you can, and you haven't asked Dr. Tammy, right?
Yeah. And I also would like to offer your listeners, if they want, if they email me and tell me that they heard me here, I'll give them a free, like I have this handout. It's like a worksheet of like 37 questions for your new monogamy agreement. So it's a great thing to like start the conversation without having to buy the books. And
yeah, awesome. Yay. Okay, that's super cool. Well, I'm going to set you up with the last question that I always ask everybody. And I'm super interested in moments and sparks in our lives. What brings us to where we are seated in the moment of today? So could you share one with our listeners, person, place, or thing, just a spark that you're like, today, here, brought you here?
I was really inspired by Melinda Gates, who's Bill Gates' wife, who wrote The Moment of Lift. And because it's all about women sort of gathering their energy and getting ready to take over the planet. And I don't know about you, but I could feel it. And I feel a little hesitancy now. Like I feel like they're a little blocked and depressed and stressed and exhausted. But I feel like the energy is there. And that gave me a lot of comfort in a time in my life where I was sort of giving up on the whole goddess thing. I was like, where are you? I'm like, what happened? I was totally into you. And I thought you were like supporting me. But when I realized that there is sort of this universal feeling of, oh no, it's coming, we're rising. I felt much better. I went to the Women's March in Washington with my daughter, who was 16 at the time. And I felt that power on that march and how many women were there. And it was intense.
Yeah, I was there with you.
Yeah, it was great. It was great.
Yeah, it was a moment for sure in my life as well. And that book is terrific. I mean, she's amazing. And that book is amazing. I'm with you. I go from moments of being like, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna wiggle it like this and do it within the confines of stuff. And then other times I'm like, I'm a Valkyrie, like, right? Where I'm just like, enough, but like, that scares the crap out of people, but
so what?
Good, right?
Let them be scared.
Yeah. But
I should be scared. Be very afraid.
I do feel it. I do feel the sisterhood, and I feel that rising still, and from that and continuous, no matter, all the things that happen, I think women will save the world.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. So, thank you for being on. So
thank you for having me.
Absolutely. What a delight. And everybody, there'll be all kinds of great information in the show notes. And we will have you be able to connect and make sure about that wonderful offer for our listeners as well. I so appreciate that. Thank you for sharing your story and all the brilliant things that you do in the world and how many people you help. And thank you so much. It's great.
No problem. So I know you'll have my email down there, but if people want to email me at tammy@drtammynelson.com, I'll send them a free gift. Just tell me that, they met me through you.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds wonderful. Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Tammy Nelson, PhD.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, you bet. It's so good. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us again. That's another episode of the Mavens Do It Better podcast. And here's to another big, beautiful day on this blue spinning sphere. The original music on this podcast was created by Jesse Case.